Hey, what's up everybody? We're back inside the Discovery Loft, back inside the kitchen, and giving you a little update on this little sourdough starter that I started about a day and a half ago. So a friend of mine decided that I was gonna start her sourdough journey with her, and then she told me not to kill it. So I thought what I'm gonna do is I'm not really ready to go in there in that world right now. I've got so many things on my plate, so many worlds literally spinning, that I'm just gonna follow exactly what she does. Whatever she does in a day, I'm gonna follow the exact same process until I realized her process is not my process, which has become the Discovery Loft process. So I learned very quickly that I cannot just take instructions and just apply them without formal understanding. It keeps me in a very confused and frustrated state. So today I decided she's making dough, she's getting ready, she made cinnamon rolls last night, she's getting ready to have a loaf today. And I realized I really had to go back to the beginning. And I always go back to the beginning when I'm confused, not because I need to start over, but because I need to get reoriented. What exactly is it that I'm trying to accomplish? What is actually going on, and how is the framework set up for me to work through it? And I realized I didn't really understand what a sourdough starter was for. I've always kind of had like this idea like, oh, sourdough, you have to like, it's alive and it's an ecosystem, and people say all those words, which we use those words here at the Discovery Loft. So I was getting even more frustrated at the fact that I was not understanding what they were saying. So I decided I'm starting over and I'm going back to the beginning. What the heck is this thing and what are we doing with it? And the truth is, it was so simple, it almost caught me off guard. But a sourdough starter, if you want to know it, how it made sense to me, is basically like a yeast garden, if you will. So this yeast garden is producing yeast that we're going to be able to use for other products and to make other things. So say you had a garden and you had an herb section and you had basil. You're growing that basil, not to consume basil specifically, but to take that basil and put it into different red sauces or whatever and make another product. It's an ingredient for another product. And the end goal here is not to make starter. The end goal here is to make bread or pretzels or something of the bread variety. And this sourdough starter is supposed to replace like commercialized yeast. Did not realize that. I haven't spent enough time looking at it. I hadn't had enough time to really understand what was going on. So when I got oriented that this is really basically just replacing the need for yeast in our bread recipes, it really made sense to me. So okay, now we have this item that is basically a piece of a recipe, and you have to keep this guy alive. So everybody was saying half it and discard recipes, and I was really lost. I'm like, what do you mean discard? Why am I cutting it in half? What is the point of having half taken out? What happens if the half doesn't get taken out? And then I realized there's two sets of things actually happening here. There's a set of instructions and a world for the starter itself, and then there's a set of instructions that you're actually working on that's a framework for the baker. That was not making complete sense to me until I kind of worked it out from the beginning all the way to here. So the starter doesn't necessarily need to be cut in half because the rules say, if you don't cut me in half, I'll die. The truth is that's a framework for containing the starter, for not getting out of control and becoming, the size of my 10-foot island, which I would have no place to store that. And I don't know really what I would do with that, considering I only make bread a couple times a week. But now that I understand we're keeping it at bay to contain it, because this thing is alive, like a plant or a bush in your garden, that if you never pruned it and you never got rid of any of its fruit, it would eventually become very massive and probably overtake our garden. So that's really what we're trying to do, is contain it. So fast forward to where I'm at today. I'm starting to understand these principles. I'm starting to understand these concepts. I now understand that this is an ingredient to a recipe that we're replacing from commercialization, which sounds like a really good thing to do. I'm glad I'm doing it, but I'm just starting to get caught up with myself here. So basically where I'm at is I have a firm understanding that this is now replacing commercialized yeast. Love that. I understand that I have to continue to grow this in an environment that is good for it to stay alive. So then I was like, okay, so what's the difference of me putting it in the fridge versus the difference of me putting it on the counter? And really it's representing the different seasons that your garden, your yeast garden, can go through. So in the summer, our plants produce a lot of fruit. They move quite quickly, they absorb the heat, and they expand and they grow. Same thing with our yeast garden here. So the yeast garden is gonna do the same thing. So when you have it out in the room temperature, it's going to grow faster. And if it's warmer, it's gonna grow even faster, because you're just supplying more. And you know what? I'm not even totally sure what we're supplying more of, but it is the concept of it's warmer, so it moves faster and continues to grow. In the fridge, it's kind of like a bear hibernating. We're kind of slowing down its process, or what a garden or a tree goes through during the winter process. It's not that it's totally dead, it just becomes a little less active. And the slower that activity, the less you have to deal with it, and the less you have to feed it to keep it alive. So this is pretty much what I've learned in the last 48 hours of being involved in the sourdough world. So the last thing I'll tell you, so this isn't too long, is the last thing that kept really frustrating me was the concept of, well, it needs to be a strong starter. It's hungry. Like, and I know what those words mean when I'm describing certain things, but it doesn't mean that I totally understood what it meant in regards to the sourdough starter specifically. So I guess a strong starter is going to have a particular smell to it. So if it's in the beginning, how I understand it thus far, and this is like literally 48 hours worth of information, I'm just saying if you're a starter like me and you're freaking like, I don't even know what we're talking about, this is where I'm at. It, to me, when I take my lid off, smells like beer. Straight up beer or like bread, and it's very liquidy. So what I've been learning the last couple hours essentially is that the 1-to-1 ratio doesn't work for everybody. So when I say 1-to-1 ratio, everybody was telling me you got to put the same amount of bread flour for the same amount of water, and that's what you mix in, and then the volume should double, and then you half that. You can take that discard, you make a recipe with it or give it to someone else, and then you let it go back, and then you feed it again. You have to keep the thing alive. So that being said, I think all that's true, but for me, in the first couple days, my instinct has been to like, fix it, make it into bread, mix it into bread, and I'm like, hang on, slow down. That's not even what we do here at the Discovery Loft. We really like to understand the mechanisms at play before we start forcing something to produce. So I'm a bit of a storyteller, and I'm a bit of a bleeding heart when it comes to living things that can't quite speak the same language we do. So I thought about it from this perspective. This is like 100-something-year-old starter my friend bought from another place. I don't even know where it came from. Then I went to my friend's house, and I took it to my sister's house, and I forgot it in her fridge because, well, I'm forgetful. And then I got all the way home and then realized that it was at her house, and then I had to pick it up from my sister's house, which then went to another house with me and then made it back here. That was like a 2-day journey for it on top of its journey to get to my friend from wherever it came from. Don't know. Still don't know. Should have looked. Didn't care. All right. So now I'm like, you know what? This guy's been through a journey. He's seen some places, and we haven't had it in a place that's really stable. So I just want to let it do its thing. It's producing a ton of bubbles. There's more bubbles than earlier, but I'm not seeing the volume. So in the last couple hours, like I was saying, I started learning that not everybody follows that 1-to-1 ratio because it might not actually be feeding the food properly. And this is where conscious cooking really comes in, and why, honestly, even though I wasn't ready for it, and it's been a bit of a frustrating process for me, it's also a huge learning opportunity to explore actively how the mechanisms work, how the ecosystem is formed around a framework that we can actually work through. So that's what I'm doing here today. And I'm already watching my friend. She's sending me updates and videos of all her like dough rising. And I have the instinct to start playing with it. But I told myself I was gonna give it a full 48 hours before I really started messing with it and just allowed it to kind of do what it's gonna do. And even as I sit here, I see the bubbles continuing to form. So she's pretty bubbly, she's very liquidy. I don't think this is right. I don't even know what right is, but actually as I move it, it does look a little more firm than it did earlier. So I think what I'm gonna do tonight at 6 o'clock, if it doesn't look any different, I may or may not half any. I don't even know at this point. I don't know what's right. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what's good. I don't know what's up. I don't know what's down. But I decided I'm gonna give it a full 48 hours. I said I was doing 48 hours. I'm gonna do 48 hours. So I'll be back at 6 o'clock. We're checking this boy out, and I might be just adding maybe like half water, double flour, and see what that gets me for like a 1-to-2 ratio for now, and then see how we look tomorrow. So that'll be taking us into day 3. And if that helped you at all with your starter, journey, Bofrau, if not, I might change that and say, hey, you know what? That was all horse pocky. Start over. Don't even listen to that video. I'll have to delete it off the internet. I don't really even know. But anyways, that's how the Discovery Loft process works. It's a lot of exploration. It's a lot of breaking down. It's a lot of going back to the beginning to really uncover what you know about something versus the beliefs you think you have about it. And also slowing down the system and widening the frame long enough to really get a look at what you're trying to do here. Anyways, that's it. And that's all I have for today. We'll see you guys soon.